Atop the rooftop, battered and alone, Ziel opened her eyes to a most peculiar sight. A man, shimmering and transparent, stood before her as the rains of Raxus came to a sudden halt. Contrary to what would make sense, the droplets of water hadn't ceased falling, but rather stood in place as if time itself had been undone. "Your fight isn't over, little one," the man veiled in a deep shade of blue called out. Instinctually, Ziel slowly turned her head toward the edge of the roof and spotted the beginning of Anakin's duel with Barriss. Even though time had stopped moving forward, the young girl could feel the palpable hatred which radiated off of the Togruta. Though the combatants were in a situation which could see them both killed, Anakin didn't care. His sense of reason may have remained, however, he had abandoned fear entirely. With his face obstructed by the hood of a robe, the man kneeled beside Ziel and placed a hand upon her ripped-open stomach. "What an interesting girl you are," the man uttered. "Born amidst death and life. By all rights, you should have been long since dead, never knowing the touch of the Force. Yet here you are, clinging to a spark which has yet to go out." Though she couldn't see it, Ziel felt a grin stretch across the man's face. Then, before she knew it, the wound which was bound to kill her was no more. "Thrice now, you have defied death, defied destiny." There was a hint of amusement to the man's voice. "A trend, it seems, among those you travel with." The man began to back away, and with each step he took, time slowly inched forward. "I wonder, can they succeed where we've failed?" the man asked as he began to fade. As if to answer the man's question, a harsh Raxus wind blew through the air while the planet's downpour resumed. Trying to pick herself up, Ziel felt her arms give out beneath her. Though she was no longer dying, the young girl still hadn't the strength to move. "Commander!" called out a distant voice. "We've got a live one!" A resistance soldier rushed over to the Quarren and began administering first aid with whatever supplies she had on hand. The girl's wounds may have been extensive, however, they weren't anything a bit of Bacta couldn't take care of. "Why's a girl like you out here?" the soldier asked. Before Ziel could answer, another soldier, clad in the armor of a distant era, walked over, the Quarren's lone Shoto in his grasp. "Not a girl, Corporal Roth," the soldier declared before handing the weapon back to Ziel. "A Jedi." The commander removed his battered helmet and revealed an aging face the galaxy once knew all too well. "I imagine you're friends with the kid," the soldier stated, a grin concealed beneath his beard. "Which means you're my friend as well. The name's Rex." Placing his hands upon the girl's waist, the battle-hardened old clone lifted Ziel off of the ground and onto her feet. Despite the pain she still felt, the Quarren gritted her teeth and forced herself to remain standing. Rex then unholstered one of his pistols and gave it to Ziel. "We're going after Anakin," the clone explained, "so stay behind me, and pull the trigger on whatever hostiles get in our way." Unflinchingly, the girl nodded and followed the old captain into the tattered Raxus war zone. At rapid speeds, Anakin descended down the length of a skyscraper as he brought his weapon to bear down upon Barriss. He held little regard for his own life, let alone his safety, and fell far faster than the falling rains of Raxus. The young Togruta only had one thing on his mind: kill the Inquisitor who inflicted such horrific indignities upon him, break free of her grasp, no matter the cost. "You crazy bastard, you'll see us both dead!" Barriss shouted as she desperately searched for a way to escape. "Fine by me," Anakin barked, throwing any remaining caution to the wind. Seeing an opportunity, the Togruta stabbed his blade into the Inquisitor's heel, causing his enemy to spin uncontrollably in the air as they continued to fall. Closing in on the surface of Raxus, Barriss outstretched her only remaining arm to the side and used the force to propel herself into a nearby building, crashing into a window. Anakin did the same but acted far too late, landing a few floors below his opponent. "Sith spit," the boy cursed, standing up and picking glass out of his leku. Bombed out and derelict, the Togruta had found himself in an office building that was worse for wear. Light fixtures were dangling by their wires, and desks had been thrown about all over the place. The sight wasn't an awful one, for there weren't any corpses, however, that was about to quickly change. Is that," a distant voice stammered in fear. "Is that a Jedi?" Anakin looked up and met his gaze to that of several Imperial Army soldiers. Unlike stormtroopers, these individuals lacked the training and equipment necessary to make the fight before them seem reasonable. They were dead men walking, and they knew it. What are you standing there for?" screeched the squad's commanding officer. "Take him out!" The Imperials raised their weapons to fire, but hit nothing. Anakin dodged their shots by dipping behind the desks which littered the former office space, and used the building's darkness to keep his enemies guessing as he closed the distance. While running, the Togruta used the Force to lift a broken-down segment of wall into the air and threw it at the frantic soldiers. The attack killed one of his assailants by crushing his skull between the rubble and floor, resulting in a blood splatter that soaked his comrades. One Imperial let out a horrified scream as another dropped her weapon and ran. Those who retained their composure barely did so. They couldn't believe the sight before them. The Jedi had passed into myth. The traitors who betrayed the galaxy had been wiped out. How could this be happening? Its crimson blade flickering in the darkness, Anakin tightened his grip around his weapon's hilt and brought it down upon one of his assailants' heads, splitting him in two. He then followed this attack up by bisecting a woman at the waist and kicking another soldier out a nearby window. Fearing for their lives, those that remained dropped their weapons and fled. They now understood full well what it meant to tangle with a Jedi. The Togruta began to give chase, but stopped as the sight of Barris's purple lightsaber caught his eye. She had touched down on the streets of Raxus and was attempting to flee. Her progress, however, was slow. The all-consuming planetary firefight between the Imperials and Resistance was impeding her path. Despite the Inquisitor's own desires, she was forced to participate and kill any rebel fighter that dared to stand before her. Taking a few steps back, Anakin deactivated his weapon and lunged out the window with a Force-imbued jump. Sensing something was off, the Inquisitor panicked and hastily raised her blade to meet that of the Togrutas. Upon making contact, the collision of lightsabers sent out a small shockwave which involuntarily dropped the Morellian to one knee. "Jedi!" a stormtrooper barked from behind cover. "Take him down!" The Imperial soldiers that lined the debris-laden street shifted their focus away from the Resistance and toward Anakin. As they opened up, the boy disengaged Barris and darted into a back alley. Bending a corner to get out of the enemy's line of sight, the Togruta came face to face with an even greater number of trigger-happy imps. The moment they spotted the would-be Jedi, they opened up and forced the boy onto the defensive. Sensing danger, which was rapidly approaching from behind, Anakin strengthened his grip around the lightsaber's hilt, cracking its casing, and decided to sprint back down the way he came. Bending the alley's corner once more, this time from the opposite direction, the Togruta decapitated a thoroughly surprised stormtrooper before tearing into the rest of the approaching horde. Anakin fought with a ferocity, a passion he had never known before. All the emotions he kept buried had been unleashed all at once, turning him into what was essentially a berserker. With limbs and other severed appendages replacing the cushion of soldiers between her and the boy she tortured, Barris realized how out of her depth she truly was. She had pushed the Togruta well past his breaking point and utterly failed in her duties as an Inquisitor. In place of an insidious corruption, there was only a burning hate, which made Anakin stronger. "Barris!" the boy screamed at the top of his lungs. The Inquisitor shook her head and trembled. She wanted absolutely nothing to do with what Anakin had become. In a panic, the once arrogant Morellian turned her back on the dwindling number of Imperials and sprinted away as fast as she possibly could. "Get back here, you witch!" the Togruta howled, his boiling rage apparent. Looking back, Barris felt a sense of fear well up in her chest as Anakin cut down every Imperial that got in the way of his pursuit. It only took a moment for the Inquisitor to realize there was no way she could outrun her adamant opponent. If she was to make it out of this situation alive, she had to think of something quick. Overhead, the space battle above Raxus had taken an unforeseen turn as it drifted closer and closer to the planet's atmosphere. Countless dogfights and engagements between smaller vessels had been taken in by gravity. These clashes in the storm clouds were playing out mere miles above the tops of the city's skyscrapers, with some daring strike craft skimming the ground and trying to influence the fighting in the streets. One such craft, a TIE fighter, flew a bit too close to Barriss and met an unfortunate fate. Reaching out with the Force, the Inquisitor got a hold of it and pushed the supposedly friendly vessel into the ground toward Anakin. The explosion that followed its impact engulfed the street in a roaring inferno, killing numerous soldiers on both sides of the conflict. The Togruta, however, Barriss's intended target, was not among the casualties' number. Seeing the attack coming, Anakin had leapt into a nearby building and was continuing his pursuit. Reaching the end of his path, the boy barreled through a window and soared through the air, his crimson blade poised to strike Barriss. "Go away, you annoying pest," the Inquisitor shouted, throwing a piece of debris at Anakin. The boy raised his lightsaber and cut the rebel in two before landing in front of his opponent. He didn't give the Inquisitor any time to react, however, and slashed at her in a blinding rage. Though she was able to narrowly dodge it, the kinetic force that followed Anakin's strike pushed her backward. It was an experience Barriss had never felt before, and that concerned her. Activating her weapon, the one-armed Inquisitor fought desperately to stay alive as the young Togruta wailed on her. During her time with the Jedi Order, the Morellian had been taught that passion, emotions such as hatred and rage, were gateways to the dark side. The woman may have abandoned almost every lesson instilled into her, but that one in particular had always stuck. She had used it time and again to break captured Padawans, turn them into loyal servants of the Empire. Yet here was Anakin, defying everything she understood. The Inquisitor couldn't make sense of what she was seeing, or rather, refused to make sense of it. For if she was to do that, ask what separated her from the boy she once toyed with, she'd be forced to confront what she couldn't face. "Do you think you're better than me?" Barriss screamed, her composure slipping. Popping her shoulder out of place, the thoroughly drenched Inquisitor lurched her blade forward and seared off the tip of Anakin's leku. With his offhand, the Togruta punched Barriss in the face to force her back and kicked her in the stomach. "Shut up!" Anakin barked. "Loose lips, shut up. I'm tired of your voice." His rage getting the better of him, the Togruta further squeezed the hilt of his lightsaber and irreparably damaged its frame, exposing a portion of the weapon's crystal. Despite the blood which rolled off his hands, the boy hadn't realized his fingers were dislocated. He was far too gone to notice such things, let alone feel pain. With the Battle of Raxus closing in on the pair's duel, both combatants threw caution to the wind and darted toward one another as the raging storm only grew more intense. Barriss's fear had been replaced with a hatred she couldn't quite pin down. The source eluded her, but it didn't matter, for she would make Anakin pay for his insolence. Surrounded by a growing number of Imperials, the Togruta was forced to disengage time and again to thin out the herd. The Inquisitor, however, made this task a daunting one. For every time he broke off, the boy opened himself up and was cut to pieces by the woman's purple saber. However, each strike that connected only enraged Anakin further, and as he plunged his blade into the base of a stormtrooper's skull, the Togruta finally lost what little sense of reason he had left. "Together," the boy cackled. "We die together." Reaching for Barriss, Anakin raised his failing lightsaber and snapped it in two, causing the weapon's crystal to explode. Spears were thrown, soldiers torn to shreds, as the very ground those still alive stood upon shook and cracked. The entire intersection the duel had been unfolding upon erupted into a wonderfully melancholic display of color, leaving a small crater where the pair of combatants once stood. "What the hell was that?" Rex asked, looking to his men for answers. Ziel pointed down the block, toward a particularly devastated part of the city. "It came from there," the girl explained. Wasting no time, the old clone and those under his command fought recklessly to reach the explosion's point of origin. Though he didn't have any proof, he knew that would be the place he'd find Anakin. Coughing up blood, and touching the vacant socket where his right eye used to be, Anakin began to regain his senses. "How am I alive?" the boy asked himself before the realization that nothing was moving dawned on him. "Are you?" asked the disembodied voice of a man. "Your body may remain in spite of the odds, yet are you truly alive?" "You're damn right I am," Anakin barked. "So cut the philosophy, show yourself." There was a twisted laugh which echoed throughout the motionless city. "Outstanding," the voice continued. Seems my interference won't be in vain. Standing up, the Togruta noticed the entirety of his left arm was missing and understood it as a consequence of the lightsaber's detonation. Never knew they could do that. Huh, the boy admitted to himself. From other, lesser wounds, blood continued to pour. Though Anakin couldn't see it, he knew full well his body had been mangled rather extensively. Your fight isn't over quite yet, the disembodied words claimed as the sounds of battle slowly began to return. I won't help you again, so please, don't waste this chance. With the smell of burning flesh in the air, the Togruta looked up to the clearing sky and watched as the planetary batteries of Raxus tore into Imperial warships. The boy couldn't help but smile as he was reminded of fireworks from a life that seemed so very distant. Anakin, the distant voice of Ziel called out. Before he could react, the girl rammed into the Togruta's side and embraced him. I'm sorry I didn't act sooner, the boy apologized. Ziel pulled away and shook her head. There was nothing to apologize for. Well, I'll be, kid, you're still alive, Rex quipped as he approached the pair. Look worse for wear, sure, but it builds character. Anakin smiled warily and dropped to one knee as all the pain he ignored hit him at once. In the skies above Raxus, the main Rebel Alliance fleet finally dropped out of hyperspace, the Resolute leading the charge and joined the fray. The Empire was losing. It was only a matter of time until their imminent defeat. Sensing something, the battered Togruta looked to the wreckage of a smoldering speeder and rose to his feet. Removing his mother's Shoto from Ziel's belt, Anakin pushed himself forward. Something wrong? Rex asked, motioning to the others. She isn't dead, the Togruta declared. The Inquisitor. The old clone placed his hand upon the boy's shoulder, stopping him. We've got your back, kid, Rex said with a nod. We've got your back, Jedi. Inching forward, step by step with Ziel, Rex, and the others in tow, Anakin made his way over to the unconscious Inquisitor. Like him, Barriss was mutilated to the point of being unrecognizable, yet was still alive. Activating his mother's Shoto, the boy placed its blade beneath his tormentor's chin. He wanted to kill her with every fiber of his being, yet was afraid to do so. Are you going to do it? A familiar voice called out, the unrelenting downpour still falling. Turning around, Anakin came face to face with an approaching Galen. Battered and bloodied, it was all too apparent the young Jedi's journey through the war-torn city had been a difficult one. I shouldn't, the boy replied. But you want to, Galen concluded. There's nothing wrong with admitting that, especially around me. I get it. Stepping up beside the Togruta, Galen looked down at Barriss and sighed. Like most people, I don't think this woman understands the dark side, the young Jedi admitted. One mistake, a single slip-up in the heat of the moment, it doesn't make someone fall. There was a pause as Galen unhooked his lightsaber. Running away. That's what does it. Anakin gave the young Jedi a sideways glance as he too activated his weapon and pointed it at the Inquisitor. Imagine that's what happened to her, Galen explained in reference to Barriss. She did something awful and couldn't live with it. To justify her actions, she gave into the dark side, continued doing horrific things because she couldn't face what she did. A silence fell upon the pair as Ziel walked over to Anakin's side. It's a vicious cycle, the Jedi continued. The greater the mistake, the bigger the mess. Galen deactivated his weapon and looked into Anakin's eyes. If you can live with it, kill her, the Jedi declared. If you can't, don't. With those words uttered, Galen motioned to Ziel and left the boy to his decision. His hands shaking, vision narrowing, heart pumping, Anakin knew full well what he wanted to do. He wanted to be rid of the influence Barriss had over him, to be free of her once and for all. If he was to kill her now, in the state she was in, he'd never be free of her. Though the witch would no longer pose a threat, a lingering guilt may persist. Deactivating the Shoto, Anakin chose to not take that risk. He beat her, For now, that would be enough. In the month that followed, Anakin and Ziel recovered from their wounds, as the last bit of Imperial resistance at Raxus was beaten back. It had been a hard-fought campaign, but in the end, the Empire was defeated. Despite some internal debate, Bonteri would go on to merge his movement with that of the Rebel Alliance, and eventually stand with Organa, Mothma, and Iblis as one of its leaders. The victory was one the rebellion desperately needed, for with it, a newfound hope spread across the galaxy. Despite being few in number and nothing like they were, the Jedi had begun to return. The actions of Ahsoka, Anakin, Ziel, and Galen had brought out of hiding many who had survived Order 66. Though most of them were inexperienced younglings, Padawans that had lost their way, a new order was beginning to form. Making his way to the Rogue Shadow, Galen stopped as he noticed Ahsoka standing upon the hangar's overlook. Stepping up to see what she was fixated on, the young Jedi noticed from on high a sleeping Anakin who was sitting beside the ship's loading ramp. "Though I know one thing for certain," Ahsoka stated, her gaze still directed at her son. "You'll find clarity being with those who understand you." Those were your words. Remember? The Togruta turned around and approached Galen. With a somber smile, she extended her hand toward the Jedi. I can't teach Anakin what he needs to know. Not anymore." The woman's words betrayed a bittersweet feeling of loss. He doesn't need a mother, but a mentor. A friend. Galen grasped Ahsoka's hand firmly. "I promise. I'll look after him." Letting go, the pair went their separate ways, until the day they'd meet again. Awoken by a swift kick to the shin, Anakin rubbed his sole remaining eye and looked up at the young Jedi. "Don't call me Master," Galen began. "Each time you do, I'll break a bone." The Jedi bent down and extended his robotic arm, a reward for one of his decisions, toward Anakin. Reaching out with his own prosthetic, the boy took hold and rose to his feet. He then began to laugh as a sense of irony struck him. "How'd, you get yours?" Anakin asked, waving his metallic hand. From the loading ramp, Ziel emerged with Proxy in tow. "Are you guys coming?" the girl chastised the pair. Galen motioned towards the Quarren. "Same way you did." Together, the pair boarded the Rogue Shadow and departed Raxus. Though new challenges awaited them in a rapidly changing galaxy, the ever-growing crew of Jedi were prepared to meet them.